Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Ryan Day, Ohio State continued to build, at least in my mind, one of the most impressive recruiting classes we've seen in a very long time, adding the commitment from four-star edge rusher Zion Grady from the state of Alabama. Now, not only is Zion Grady one of the more intriguing prospects in my mind in this 2025 class, a kid that just has a ton of upside at the collegiate level. This is also a extremely impressive recruiting battle victory. And you look at Zion Grady, he was a top target for a plethora of SEC programs. And for a while, it seemed like he was a lock to kind of stay in the SEC, whether it was Georgia, Alabama, Auburn. And Ohio State gets him on campus this weekend, locks in the commitment. Not only a really impressive prospect here that we're going to get into, but a really impressive recruiting win for Ryan Day, Larry Johnson. This Ohio State staff fired up to get into Zion Grady, one of my personal favorites. Before we get into it, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. And this Ohio State class, it's been a blast covering, breaking down commitments. The amount of support you guys continue to show certainly does mean a lot. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into Zion Grady and let's start talking about the kind of player, the kind of prospect that Zion Grady is. He a little bit of a different flavor in terms of what he brings as an edge rusher, as opposed to guys like JTT and Jack Sawyer, who, for lack of better terms, are just Mack trucks, physically imposing edge rushers that are going to kind of impose their will on opposing offensive linemen. You look at Zion Grady and say, if Jack Sawyer and JTT are Mack trucks, Zion Grady's a Ferrari coming off the edge, right? Not necessarily the big time frame that JTT and Jack Sawyer has, but the athleticism, the first step. And this is a special caliber athlete coming off the line of scrimmage. And I think more importantly, can be really versatile. This is a guy that can play the wide nine, can play the 5 tech, can stand up, be an edge rusher, can drop back and operate in coverage. You look at Jim Knowles and say, one of the things that makes Jim Knowles one of the best defensive coordinators in the country is that he knows how to use his personnel the right way. Zion Grady is a guy that can do so many different things, and I can't wait to see how Jim Knowles implements Zion Grady in this Ohio State defense. And I think the most exciting aspect about a guy like Zion Grady is I think the ceiling is exceptionally high for this kid, right? Not only elite athleticism, but you take a look at the length, over 34-inch arms. There's just not that many offensive linemen that are going to be able to deal with the length in the first step that Zion Grady brings to the table. And if you can kind of get some more weight on that frame, teach him how to use that length, that the sky's the limit for this kid in terms of what he can be and what he can become as an edge rusher at the collegiate level, fired up to get into the film. And again, I think one of the things that stands out is just the variety of ways that Zion Grady plays on the defensive line. You'll see him play the 3-tech to 5-tech, kind of that wide nine. I think he's at his best in that 2-point stance, really being able to operate in some space, but a guy that you can move all along the line of scrimmage. But I think more importantly, just the amount of ways that he can beat opposing offensive linemen. I mean, he can win with power. He's 6'4", 235, not necessarily the biggest frame yet, but the power that this kid has in his hands is impressive. I mean, he works through guys, can use that length and kind of get hands on offensive linemen and collapse some of those pockets. But again, when you look at Zion Grady and what he can do a little bit more in space, kind of as that stand-up outside linebacker, this is what I love. Like, how many times do we need to see edge players at the collegiate level, especially with programs like USC and Washington and Oregon coming into the Big Ten? You need your guys to operate in space, be able to run the line of scrimmage, make plays in space. Zion Grady's closing speed is almost like an off-ball linebacker in those situations. This is probably where he's at his best, like 2-point stance and a little bit of space, being able to get off the line of scrimmage. And again, multiple ways he can win. He can win with that devastating first step, attack the outside shoulder of opposing offensive linemen. But, I mean, he's got some power in the hands as well. You see the length as he's lining up, and he's just going to go right through this opposing right tackle. I mean, dominant, strong hands, gets to the quarterback. Again, a variety of ways that he can be utilized and how he can win as an edge rusher, knows how to use the length as well. And again, this is where I love him the most in terms of being able to operate in space and challenge these offensive linemen in space a little bit from an athletic standpoint, using that length, nice little swim move, closes the gap, goes and gets the quarterback. This is kind of an apex predator along the defensive line that you can use in a lot of different ways, routinely in the backfield. You take a look at the production for Zion Grady during his high school career as a junior, had 87 tackles, 24 tackles for a loss, 11 sacks. You go back to his sophomore year, over 108 tackles, 35 tackles for a loss, and 22 sacks. He operates in space exceptionally well. I think this is a very intriguing commitment for Ohio State and a guy that has just so much upside at the collegiate level. And you take a look at what Ohio State's doing in 2025. We've talked about it extensively. 3 players in the top 10 right now. It sounds like to visit with David Sanders, the #1 offensive tackle in the class, went pretty well this weekend. You got 9 players in the top 100 nationally. I mean, that is 10% of the top 100 players at the high school level are coming to Ohio State, with potentially adding a few more of those names. That is an extremely impressive number for Ohio State. And you look at that edge position, they're also going after another guy in Justin Hill, who I think Ohio State's in a really good spot for, kind of similar to Zion Grady, where a little bit of an undersized edge rusher as we stand right now. This is a kid that runs almost an 11-second 100-meter dash. The get-off speed for Justin Hill, again, really impressive. You're seeing Ohio State go after kind of some twitched-up edge rushers that can really attack offensive linemen from an athletic standpoint. I am a massive fan of what Ohio State's building in this 2025 class. It gets that much better with Zion Grady. It sounds like we got plenty more commitments to talk about for Ohio State. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.